guys, this is me, Malorian, and this will be another Warmachine 101. This is where I take your questions from the Facebook page and I answer them. And today, you guys are awesome because you guys asked a whole load of questions. So I'll make sure to get these on now, and should be some fun. So the first one here comes from Bob Smith, and he says, tournaments and cons on a budget. Now, if you're wanting, I mean, one of the greatest things about this hobby is the tournament scene, is the conventions, if you can make it to it, just the atmosphere, and whether you're there for being very competitive, or there to just be with friends and drink if that's the thing, or, you know, just see what else is out there, they're awesome. However, they also cost a little bit of money, and so clearly, you know, if you want to do this on a budget, you know, you got to start making some cuts, and you got to start understanding what is going to be really what you're after versus the value that you're going to be associating with this. So, I mean, I'm sure if you look out there, you can find amazing, amazing conventions, but they could be far away, they could be extremely expensive. Meanwhile, there could be stuff nearby. So, I mean, if you're looking at something like Lock and Load, it's like, wow, a plane ticket would cost this much, and a hotel would cost this much, and of course I'm eating out, so that's this much. And then there's also the tournament passes and stuff as well, and that's going to cost this much. Okay, that's this value here for like the dollars I'm going to put into it. Well, how much fun am I going to have with this? How awesome is it going to be? And it could be huge. It could be like, wow, this will be the best thing ever. But you have to then go and try and compare it to the opposite where, okay, well, really, if I want to go to a tournament, the store down the street, it runs, you know, a 12-person tournament every single month. I can do that. It's 10, 20 bucks. You know, if I'm really just trying to get a lot of Warmachine in one weekend and I want to kind of like flex my competitive muscles, well, maybe that's just what you want to go after. Now, of course, there's a spectrum, and however far you want to push that, that's going to be really up to you. But some of the key ways you can be keeping costs down is, first of all, finding things close to you. I mean, not only does that mean that it's not much driving and gas to try and get there and back, that you don't need to fly, but it also means that you don't need to, hopefully, need to get any hotels. So if that's, I'm going to be going over to this here, it's in the next town, that's great. I can go there, I can play there, I can drive back, I have to not spend that much on fuel, I didn't have to fly, and I don't need a hotel. That's fantastic. If it's a little bit farther and you need to now be dedicating quite a bit in gas, well, try and find ways to share this with other people. Get a carpool going. You know, looking at all that gas isn't so bad when you're dividing it by 4. Plus, maybe try and work in a thing where, hey guys, I'm going to be driving, and so start putting in your time, your own services, to make up for that. Say, I'll be the driver, but you guys are paying for gas. I'm going to be paying for, let's say, the 8-hour drive to get there. You guys are paying for the gas. And that's a good way you can kind of like get ahead on that. Now, of course, once you get there, and we are saying this is a further away one, if it's going to be something where it's going to be, you're needing a hotel, well, okay, try and find, of course, ones that are, maybe you don't need to stay in that 4-star hotel, maybe the one that's another couple of streets down, but it's, you know, half the price, might be the right one to go for. Again, sharing with people, so whether you're getting a room where, you know, each of you have your own bed, or someone's going to sleep on the couch, or maybe someone's going to sleep in a sleeping bag on the floor, you know, again, the cost isn't so bad when you're dividing it by 2, 3, or 4. Something else that I've done in the past with my brother as well is driving to a place and sleeping in the car. It's kind of like bumming it, and well, it's not that bad, but I mean, it definitely is a possibility that if you really want to make a tournament or convention cheaper by a factor of hundreds of dollars, that could be definitely one of your options. Be careful, because at some places there, you know, make sure weather's good and that stuff like that, but just know that these are options. Another option, too, is if you know people in the area. You know, maybe start working on a thing like, hey, buddy, I'm going to be going to Red Deer or whatever city this is in. How about this? If you go and take me in for this weekend and I get to sleep on your couch, when you come over here for events, you get to stay on my couch. And all of a sudden, a little bit of synergy there can be great. You know, it works great for them, works great for you. And again, you can be saving hundreds of dollars. Now, some of these larger conventions can be not just 2 days, but 3 days, even 4 days. And where this starts coming to be a bigger factor is not even so much like, ooh, that's an extra day for a hotel. this could be a lost day of work. And so if you can find some way where this will work with vacation time or something like this, that's fantastic. But if not, you might want to ask yourself, well, I would love to be there for 4 days, but if I just make it 2 days, I don't miss any work. Now I'm not losing out on something on a factor of $1,000, depending where you're working, what you're doing. But at the same time, it's like, it'll still be awesome, it'll still be a great experience, but I'm not killing myself at the bank. And of course, when it comes to food, you know, if you can be bringing in a bunch of your own snacks, like granola bars and things, so you're not needing to ditch out in the middle of, you know, during the lunch hour to go get McDonald's or whatever fast food, that can always help too. But, you know, that's, in truth, that's a smaller factor, right? That's a factor of like $50 maybe over the weekend or something, where, you know, if you really make sure that you're cutting down on the hotel costs and the transport costs, those are the big ones. So look to go with a group, try and find people you can share with, and again, it might be amazing to go to that big tournament over there, but you can always run something here. And if there's nothing here, you know, it's a good way to have a tournament that's here and cheap and close. Run one yourself, you know. Find a venue you can use. Maybe it's just your living room, and you can say, hey, I really want to be doing a tournament. Hey guys, I'm going to be running a tournament at the church, and it's going to cost blah 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 per person. And all of a sudden, by you taking the time to set up the event, to run the event, you can even be playing in it. There's nothing stopping you playing in it as long as you don't do anything shady. You know, all of a sudden you basically have a free tournament that only costs you effort. So it's totally up to you. There's lots of different tricks, and yeah, just make sure you know what you're going for and what you can afford. Alright, next one here comes from Stephen Hudson, and it says, I'm actually interested in tournament cons as well, as I will be attending my first lock and load this year. So any prep tips and what to expect would be awesome. Well, first of all, some transparency. I've never been to Lock and Load. I go to some more of the conventions here more in Canada or Western Canada, going to AttackX and GrotzCon. But something to look for going into those is just know that these things are going to be massive. You know, you'll have hundreds of people inside the hall. It's going to get hot. So make sure you dress, you know, nice and light. Make sure you bring water in with you. Make sure you bring snacks with you. And more so than nothing else, make sure you're ready to have lots of fun. And be ready that if you have too much fun, like if you drink too much, that you have plans for that as well. Whether it's keeping taxi money in your wallet, or whether you have designated drivers for each night, you know, be planned for those things too. As well, be ready that you might, in transport to these big things, have some broken models that, you know, if you're doing like a one-day thing, like one broken model is okay, you can kind of get through this. But you're at something that's 2, 3, 4 days, if something breaks, you might want to make sure you have your hobby supplies there so you can patch it up. So otherwise, I've talked about more other tournament, larger scale things for prep in previous videos. So I think with all this double talk I've done with these questions, I'll probably cut off in there. But if you have any more specific questions, you know, ask it again and I can come back to this one. Next one here comes from Jacob Brunner, and it says, how do you manage all the hobby stuff and your family with kids and a wife? Do you have some tips about that? Now, he was also asking if this is a good question. This is a fantastic question, guys. I mean, anything from the way that the game mechanics work to, you know, tournament stuff to life stuff, it's all good. And this is definitely one that is close to me because I have a wife, I have 2 kids, soon 3 kids, and I am, you know, fairly involved in the community, and it can be very hard to kind of mix all these things together. Now, to me, family time is very important, and so I always make sure that I have my family time is, I want to say, like #1, but because then that means that I'm just only ever doing family time, but I'm always making sure that that's covered every week. And one of the greatest ways I can do that is make sure that, say, during the day, my kids will come home at this time and they go to bed at this time. And for the most part, that's me and my kid time. I don't plan any other hobby things during the week. You know, they'll come home, we might do homework, we might be doing games, blah, blah, blah. And then when they go to bed, then there's going to be a mix of that could either be wife time or that could be hobby time. Whether it's painting, or I have friends coming over, or if I want to be making videos, any of this stuff, I make sure I plan that after the kids are in bed so it's not impacting that whatsoever. Now, of course, there's also that sharing with the wife time, and probably one of the best ways to deal with that point is making sure that you have a good balance and that you have a good understanding of what each other want to do. You know, right now, I'm making this video. My kids are in bed. I'm using this as hobby time, where I'm going to go and do this Warmachine 101 video, but my wife is using this time right now to go and do some crocheting. She's working on, you know, a blanket she's making for someone. So that's okay. She's doing her thing. I'm doing my thing. Maybe it's a thing like, hey, after the kids go to bed, we're going to each have an hour, 2 hours of hobby time, and then we'll get together after for this. Or, you know what? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday will be hobby days, and then Thursday, Friday, this will be together days where we get together, play a game, watch a movie, watch shows, whatever it is, right? Now, then you come to the weekends, because weekends can be a little bit more crazy, where, you know, bedtime for kids might be midnight, so that doesn't really work out the same. Plus, usually on weekends, that's where tournaments come around. Now, this is where you have to, it's more of a personal preference. But so whereas before you can really say for sure try and do stuff after kids are in bed, or try and work things out with your wife so that it's all timed out. With this, it's more of a thing with your own balance. So I make sure when possible that if I have a one-day tournament, let's say that Saturday is a tournament, Sunday I'm going to fully devote to the kids. I'm going to make sure that family and kids, that's going to be big time Sunday. Or more so for the wife, because she was busy with the kids on Saturday, I'm going to say, okay, Saturday is me day and you take care of the kids. Sunday, I'll watch the kids, you do your thing, right? Or if I have a 2-day tournament, and let's say this weekend I'm going to this, I'll make sure the following weekend, okay, I'm not going to do anything else, no painting, blah, blah. I'm going to spend as much family time as possible and really try and make that balance work. Or again, it could be a thing where, okay, I'm going to spend the whole morning and the whole afternoon with the family, and then in the evening, when things should be quieting down and, you know, maybe the kids are watching a movie or something, then that's where I'm going to have people over, and I'll try and do something then. So it's really just trying to make that time work around the kids, because you can't really sit down and say, hey kids, how about we do blah, blah, blah. You know, it's kind of more working around their schedule, and then just talking to your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and then making sure you have that balance with them as well. So very critical question. Another one that could be another factor to this too is family, hobby, and health, but that can be for another day. Next one here will be coming from Mark Howard. And his question here is, I wonder about power attacks outside of slams and throws. Outside of those, I see headbutts sometimes, but I never see hand weapon locks or pushes. Do you think those two are underutilized in Warmachine these days? Well, here's a big thing about power attacks. Power attacks, talking about them in general, are options you should be keeping in mind, but don't expect that, like, oh man, I gotta make sure I try and bring power attacks into my game, and I gotta do a power attack every single time. There's been several times where I've been like, ooh yeah, it's power attack time, and I go for something silly like a slam, when really I should just be walking up and just hitting things and killing things. So realize that power attacks are a powerful option, but they're not always your best option. In fact, they're usually not your best option. Now, like you say here, that some of these you see a lot, like slams and throws, they happen quite often, but in headbutts you see those sometimes too, and things knocked down. But the two ones he says in particular are hand weapon locks and pushes. Now, out of those two, I find pushes come up more often. The 2 times I normally see, let's say 3 times I normally see pushes, is one, you know when sometimes people are like, I'm just going to toe the zone to try and make sure that you can't really take it? Well, that's fine. Sometimes if I want to make sure that heavy gets out, I just push them out. It's a guaranteed thing. Well, it's not guaranteed. You know, you automatically hit, but then there's a strength thing. But sometimes that's what I'll go for, right? I've had that with my Buccaneers, where if he runs a whole bunch of infantry and they're all just towing in the zone, well, I could try and attack them and try and kill them, but if I flub anything, it's kind of screwed. If I go in for a push, I automatically hit, my strength should be higher than most infantry, and I just boop, push you the inch out, hooray, I dominate the zone. So I've sometimes found that, you know, The times you'd be doing that and not a slam are times where, again, you just need the inch and you don't have a straight line, because slams have to be directly to directly. It's not even charges. We can like kind of go towards, but on the side, it has to be middle to middle. And you also need to have 3 inches. And you don't always have that, right? Whereas you can go do, 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 and do a little push. So that's kind of nice there. As well as the pushes, you can be using them as threat extenders. So if you need to have that heavy 1 inch closer, maybe it's worth for another heavy to go and push them forward, right? That one heavy did nothing but a push, but, you know, that 1 inch could be the difference of getting the jump in there, maybe getting a caster kill, taking out a key heavy, who knows what. Sometimes that's the right play. Again, that's fairly rare. Now, the other one I find sometimes is when they're trying to tie up my model. So let's say something runs in and is trying to engage me and I can't really kill it. Well, one of the best ways I can unengage another model is to come up and push that model, where if it doesn't have reach, then I push it away, I unengage the other one. You know, I've had that happen where I need to say free up, what's her name? Epic Iris. You know, Epic Iris, something ran over to engage it. I'm not really sure if I can kill it. Hey, automatic hit. My strength is usually higher than your infantry. Boom, I push you off of Epic Iris, and she's now free to do whatever. But again, those pushes are kind of like, you know, they're not always that common. But it's something to really keep in mind, especially that part where you automatically hit. In fact, where you see this a lot more often is, say, with Synergy, the spell. Because since it triggers on to hit, sometimes if you want to make sure you hit, let's do a push. Doesn't matter what happens, that synergy chain went up because I pushed. Really silly, but that's where that comes up. Now, hand weapon locks, oh man, that is pretty dang rare. I have almost never done hand weapon locks. And I'll tell you the rare times that I have. One, when there's something where there's like a pull-push effect, I might have one heavy grab onto another heavy. So example, actually most of my weapon locks, hand weapon locks, have been done when I was first learning the game, because my opponent played Gorton and he always loved to pull in my heavies and kill them. So my heavies would just hold hands and you can't pull one because the other one's holding on. So since you resolve them one at a time, pull number 1, nope, holding on. Pull number 2, nope, I'm holding on. So that's one you can do. Another one you can be doing is if you need to really go after one heavy, right? Let's say this is this heavy versus that heavy, and I know I'm not going to kill you, but I need to kind of make sure that you don't take out my heavy or take out the weapon. Well, what I might do with this, a weaker guy is I'll go after my strong guy and I'll do whatever I can, and then the weaker guy will come over and he'll do a weapon lock. And so in order for you to free that up, you're going to need to go and like headbutt him or something like that to get him off of you, and that's going to cost you focus and your initials that you can't now do against my guy. That's really rare, really rare. And it really also means that you have, like, you're out heavying them, and more often than not, it is, again, just better to go in there and just trying to, you know, take them down, because these things don't always work. So, again, understand how they work, but realize that out of 100 games, it might be the right play once. So, there's those. Okay, next one here comes from Steve Barwick, and he says, as a new player-ish, I find that some players pick up their dice too quick after rolling them, in which I don't get a chance to see them. Question, should the dice be an automatic re-roll if both sides don't see the roll? Now, this is a very dangerous thing to go down, because, you know, sure, there are going to be people out there who are trying to trick you, and they're trying to fast roll so you don't see, and they're rolling behind buildings so you don't realize. They're in the vast majority. Other people, it just turned out that when I rolled these dice, hey, there's a building in front of me, and that's just naturally where some of these dice fell. And, you know, having to say to them, oh, I didn't see your dice, re-roll them. Well, come on, man. Like, are you saying straight up that you think I'm a cheater? Like, that can really get the game off to the wrong front. Or, if you're on a person, let's say that they just either like playing fast because, hey, that's just their style, or hey, maybe they usually lose the death clock and they're trying to make sure that they're not losing their time to that, or maybe they are about to lose the death clock. It should be expected that they're going to be rolling a little bit faster. Now, if you do feel that somebody is doing rolling a little bit too quickly and you can't see the dice, or maybe even just that their dice are hard to read, maybe say like, hey, you know, I haven't been able to really see these. Could you roll them where I can see them a little bit further up here, you know, just so I can make sure? Or, you know, do you want to try and borrow these dice if it's a dice that they're using you can't read? But I would really... the real question here is, should you be able to make it so it's an automatic reroll? And I can't really think of any time it should be like that. Maybe if during the tournament this person had done this game after game and things seemed really, really dodgy and they brought in a judge, and then during that game the judge says, oh, you picked up that too quick, you know, re-roll them. He's really the only one that can really enforce that. It's not part of the rules. It's not part of anything. It's more that social contract between the players, right? And so the best thing you can do is just be upfront and honest with your opponent and say, hey, I know there's this massive building in the middle of the board, but could you just roll it a bit to the side? I just want to be able to see the dice too. Or, you know, okay, I know you might be a little bit worried about Death Clock, but can you know, just make sure, or can you just roll them just a little bit slower so I can kind of see them? It doesn't have to be super slow. Just make sure that you know, you give me a little bit more time. And that's probably the best way, right? It can be very touchy, and man, if you are up against one of those cheaters, it can be one of the worst gaming experiences ever. But I gotta tell you that that's gonna happen extremely rare, and if it is very common in your area, man, you gotta have like a sit-down talk with your meta, because that's not a good meta to be in type thing. So there you go. I'm guessing you were hoping that I could give you something more official, but all I can say is that the official thing would be is that if your opponent is rolling fast and rolling behind buildings, and when you give them a friendly reminder or suggestion that they kind of change it a little bit, and if they refuse to do so, call over a judge. That's the very simplest thing, saying, hey, judge, my opponent keeps on rolling behind the building, keeps on rolling really fast. And what they'll probably do is actually just stand there and watch for a while and make sure that your opponent won't be doing that. Or maybe they'll give your opponent a warning, right? Especially if it's been happening multiple times. But it is not within your control and authority to say, you have to re-roll that because I didn't see it. That's just not part of the game. Next one here comes from Kevin Ramirez, and he says, should I use Mulg instead of solos and a spear checker, or a spear thrower rather? Well, and that'd be an impaler, I'm assuming. Pretty much. I mean, I'm no troll player, but whenever the question is, should I Mulg? The answer is usually yes, because Mulg is an amazing model, great high stats. He, you know, has reach, which is huge for trolls, and I mean, of course here, it's really going to depend on what's your list and what's in it. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to make it face up against? But for the vast majority of the time, if the only time when you should not be using Mulg, it was when Mulg is already in your other list, so it can't be in this list. It's just straight up, he is an amazing model to have. And if you're looking at your two-list pairing and one of them doesn't have Mulg, you might want to ask yourself and be sure that that's actually what you are in fact wanting. So, I mean, like, let's go with this. Let's give an example where it'd be the other way. Why would you be wanting an Impaler and a solo, or solos, because I mean, Mulg's not exactly cheap, instead of Mulg? Well, one, maybe you're playing a small game. Maybe you're playing a small game that's only 10 points, and Mulg would be too big of an investment, and at that point you want to have fewer models. Maybe it's a thing where your list is really set up to be going for the range game, and you really need to get in that snipe animus from the Impaler. Or maybe these solos are really, really key. You know, maybe you need to get Janissa in there or whatever. You know, okay, maybe, but man, you better already have, like, maybe you already have the Glacier King. Maybe you figure that you already have the Glacier King for your heavy, and you'd rather have the Spear Thrower, the Impaler. I keep on reading it when it's the Impaler, so you could have the Animus to give snipe to the Glacier King rather than having the Mauler. And I mean, sure, maybe that'd be the right thing to do, but again, make sure that you have a reason for it, because he is typically the trolls I'm going to get in there and smash your face thing for almost half the cost of a Colossal usually. So there you go, guys. Or Kevin, thanks for the question. Next one here comes from Mike Anthony, and he says, do you find that net lists tend to dominate the tournament scene? Well, kind of yes, in a way. What you'll see is, of course, there are your usual lists that you always see. And I mean, one thing that's hard to kind of really distinguish is a net list and something that's just really popular in your area anyway. So, for example, a net list for Legion could be like Veil 2. But we're not seeing a lot of Veil 2 right now in my meta. We're seeing a lot more of Thagrosh 2 and Lilith 2 and Saren, you know, stuff like that. So not all of them, even though they're really popular on the internet, they might not always get to your area. However, I mean, it's also going to be a spectrum whenever you go to a tournament. You're going to have some people that are really serious about their list, and they always want to make sure they take the best thing. Well, those are going to be the people, if anyone, that's going to be taking net lists. And you're going to usually see them in the top tables. People near the bottom are usually more people that are learning the game, trying something different, or just trying to have some fun. And usually these people aren't the ones to be taking these net lists. You know, sometimes new players are. Sometimes new players like, I don't know what to take. Let's go to the forum. Ooh, this is a good Haley 2 list. Let's run this. But a lot of times, again, you know, a lot of them aren't doing that. You know, they're there more for fun. And again, it's a spectrum. There's lots of different people. But you could say then, like, okay, if I want to be in the top tables, I have to use net lists. I have to go on there, and I have to be taking these net lists. Well, here's the thing. Net lists are good because somebody, hopefully, with you know, some real knowledge of the game, has said, this is the current situation of the meta. Currently, we have to deal with Lilith 2, we have to deal with Doomy 3, we have to deal with this, we have to deal with that, we have to deal with that, and they say, I have to take this list here to deal with all those things. Well, like I've already kind of suggested prior, some of these worries, which is a specific reason for this list, might not even be in your meta. You know, maybe it's like, wow, I really need this pairing and this list in the pairing because this is my only answer to Crix, and there's Crix everywhere. Well, maybe in your area there's only 0 or 1 Crix players, and it's not really a thing you need to worry about. So that's not something you need to really do. Plus, another thing that comes up as well is that if there's a net list out there, people know it, right? And so if I go into a game and I see like, oh, there's Lilith 2, I know exactly what you're going to do. Oh, there's Raven, I know exactly what you're trying to do. There is certainly something to changing up the list and making things a little bit different. I recently played a game against Josh Richter. He's on the current Team Canada team, and he had this crazy Kruger 2 list. Normally I see like double stalkers and all this shooting, and he had all these weird different heavies that didn't really make sense to me. I'm like, sure, let's see what happens. And it turned out that he had it all specifically designed for this two-handed throw style assassination that just came out of nowhere, and I just never saw it coming. And so top players will also be able to put in a few surprises. You know, they might take the net list, but there'll be a few key changes in there to really make them different. Now, some things like the Bradigus tier list, there's not much you can change. That's going to be almost the same. But to get back to the question here, do you find that net lists tend to dominate the tournament scene? Not really. You know, when Bradigus was crazy and, you know, that thing there, sure, that one is a pretty major one, but all the other lists, I might see like Kruger 2 doing very well, but there's a lot of different Kruger 2 builds, and people usually had their own little take on it. Or in Trolls, you know, sure, you know, you have your EE list that was so dominant there with Calandra, with her tier list with all the lights, but even in that, people had a little bit of different changes in those, and, you know, some people too, since they realized that, oh, people are already building against this, they go with something else. So Grizel or whatever, right? So I would say that it's definitely a part of the tournament scene, but to say that net lists are dominating the tournament scene just wouldn't be correct. So a major player, but not dominating. All right, next one here comes from Luke Waller, and it says, what's your opinion on Proteus and whether he works well with certain casters? This is my type of question. Alright, so Proteus is much maligned by a lot of the Legion players. You know, he doesn't have a big huge shot like a Ravagore, he doesn't have reach like a Scythian, he doesn't have a really high POW, and he doesn't have like super armor past other things, and yet he's a lot of points, and it makes you kind of wonder, why would I take this guy? And so you pretty much almost never see Proteus. Now, I've had a few times where I've been loving Proteus, and you have to really make sure, though, that you have a reason for it. One, he actually does kind of have reach. You know, he has reach just on his little tentacles, and one of the things that Proteus actually does very well is kills off infantry, because he can get into a load of infantry, he has reach to really engage a lot of them, and then he actually has snacking. That's his animus, where he gets snacking, and so he can just slowly go and start killing this infantry off, and he can be keeping himself fully healed while doing that. So that can be a pretty nice thing to do. You know, depending on what your list is, you might not have a great answer to a lot of infantry, but that's something that he can do. And then while he's doing that, he also has herding. So he can be making sure that if you have something that you want to go a little bit farther than your control area, Proteus can then now enable that as well. So maybe Proteus is up there eating up some infantry, and you want to zip forward one of your other beasts or get to a key beast or heavy or critical target, and it's like, well, I need to keep him in control range, but if my Warlock moves that far up, I'm probably going to die. Hey, Proteus, you're right there. You're my best friend. So that can be something there. Proteus is also a big friend of the Forsaken, because he's one of the few Legion beasts that actually has 5 Fury, so he can load up that Forsaken all in one go. And so if it's a thing where you're up against a fast jam and you know they're going to be in your face, that Proteus, not only is he good at killing off infantry because he has the reach and the snacking and the 5 Fury for lots of attacks, but also he can be there to say, hey, Forsaken, you're fully good to go. Boom! There goes a whole bunch of infantry. Now, as far as casters that really like him, one of the ones that could be interesting is, say something like, I like the idea of him with Lilith, because it's kind of a more of a drag assassination, where all of a sudden, if you think about him, he's move 6, he has his, I think it's range 8 or something, but when you think that you could slipstream this guy, that during Lilith 2's feat that he gets sniped and he gets 2 shots, he actually has a pretty far threat to get up there, drag in a caster or a heavy or something, and then be able to kill it off. Like, the caster would be the best thing. I mean, if you could be using Lilith so that she pops feet, shoots some things out of the way, and then slipstream up if you need it, and then it goes up and with its snipe shot pulls in the enemy Warlock or Warcaster, does a little bit of damage with its claws, and then a Scythian or something comes in and finishes the job, you know, that can be a real gotcha and something that nobody really sees. As far as other casters that really love him, like I said about him extending the control range, well, that means that anyone that has a small Fury could get a lot of work out of him. So let's say you had a Rias list that had a couple of Scythians and then maybe also a Proteus. That would mean that the Scythians could charge out, you know, with the feet, hit, and hop, and whereas normally you can't force them, hey, you now have Proteus there that can be doing some hurting and stuff like that as well. With that, I was also bringing up that can come up in large games. So when you're playing large games and you're having lots of stuff going on, again, being able to extend your control range. One of the spots where I found Proteus was a VIP for me was in a game I was playing where it was like, I think it was either 100 or 150 points. But I was like, wow, if it wasn't for Proteus, this would be way harder. So I don't want to like tell you guys that he's gold and you should all go buy him, but he does have his uses. He could probably deal with being a little bit cheaper, but yeah, you know, it's sometimes fun just to do things a little bit different, and things like that Lilith 2 feat can catch people off guard. Alright, next one here comes from Alberto Ego Aguirre, and I'm sure I butchered that. When a unit makes a charge, does the whole unit have to be able to see their targets at the same time, or do you go through it one by one? Now, the big thing to think about the run order is it's not actually, or the charge order rather, is that it's not just the charge order, It's the charge run order. So realize that for each model, you're going to be able to do either of those options. And that can be very important. The second thing is that, yes, you do them model by model. So if I got my 10 models around here, and they're going to be charging these models up here, I'm going to start with one. And I'm going to say, this one's going to charge, okay, first of all, the unit is getting the charge run order. Okay, I'm going to start with this model. This one's charging here. Complete it. Now this one's going to charge here. Complete it. Oh, damn, this guy's in the way. You know, he could go in there and fight, but I want to get 3 inches for a charge attack. Okay, he's going to run out of the way. Now this one's going to charge there, right? And so, yes, you do them model after model. On that model that you're moving, it is going to have line of sight to its target, you know, unless you've got like eyeless sight or do something like that going on. It's going to have to be in its front target or front arc and all that stuff. But yeah, that's the main thing, is that you do it model by model. And you have to be very careful that you watch which ones got the 3-inch charge at least and which ones didn't. So if you got the extra dice for the charge damage, and then also if one of them ran, because sometimes like a good time that I'll run one is if I'm trying to charge in with press gangers and I want to get in gang where they'll get +2 to hit and +2 damage. So the one that's in range to charge, okay, it's going to charge. The one further back that would fail a charge will just run up there. Another thing you can find out too is that if you go in for the first one and it charges and it falls up short, you can start saying, okay, rest of the guys run to get where I need you to be. They don't. Whenever I see someone fail 2 charges in a row, I just want to like smack them, because like, come on, you know what that was. The other guy might as well run now. But there you go. Last one here comes from Brandon Correnti, and he says, again, I'm sure this is so Sorrenti, I don't know. I'm not even going to try. It comes from Brandon. I don't know what questions you've covered, but if you haven't covered line of sight and how it is affected by base sizes and terrain, that might be a good thing to spread out. Alright, line of sight can be a very huge topic, and there's a lot of different factors to it. There's some things that do block line of sight, say things like clouds and forests and big obstructions like, you know, buildings and stuff. And then there's things that don't, say like bunkers or your linear, like walls and stuff like that. And so that'd be the first layer. What actually blocks line of sight, what doesn't? Now, for the things that do block line of sight, how exactly do they work? Well, say for clouds and forests, I can see 3 inches in. So if you're partially in it and you're within 3 inches of an edge, well, I can see you. I mean, this is where a laser comes in, and you might need that laser to see, like, okay, well, you are within 3 inches of this edge, but can I actually my base see there? And that's where a line of sight laser can come in. And remember that you can check line of sight at any time. There's, you know, it doesn't matter what activation you're on or what's going on, you can always check line of sight. Now, another thing is that you can't see something on the other side of a cloud, other side of a forest. Now, there's rules around it, like Isle of Sight and Hunter and stuff like that. But in general, if you're on the other side of a forest, I can't see you unless I have some sort of special rule. Or if you're like behind the forest here, but I can still see you around this way, stuff like that. Now, there are rules around that where, like, colossals, hell, you can put that colossal behind a forest, I can still see you. You can put that colossal behind a line of clouds, I can still see you. But this is where it gets where they can actually see the other way around. Now, the best way to think of other line of sight, not just when it comes to terrain, but also with models, is that models see up, not down. So what I mean by that is that if you have a line of small base models that are in a perfect line, and over here on one side there's the caster, that's a small base model, and on the other side there is a beast, that's a large model. The caster will be able to see over the line of troops to see the heavy, the large base model, but the large base model can't see past the small bases to see that caster. Now, some people say like, oh, this is dumb, but it's actually a very important thing to keep casters alive and also reduce some of the effectiveness of some of these heavy, you know, beasts and colossals and stuff like that. So it's actually a pretty important mechanic. Now, that part can be very simple. I mean, hills can be on there, and then basically when you're on a hill, you can be seeing things that over your things that are your size or smaller. So that means if you get a colossal on a hill, he can see everything, except you can't ignore an intervening model if it's within an inch of your target. So if you have the caster, okay, my storm wall is on a hill, and your Fiora is behind the Judicator and is just behind it, like let's say base to base, within an inch. I can't ignore that Judicator. Now let's move it back 2 inches. All of a sudden, I'm ignoring that Judicator and I can see that model. So there's that part there. The last thing to do is with the heights. Now this gets really weird, and it comes in with your obstructions, and if you go in your rule book, it's like, okay, small bases go up to here, medium to here, and large to there. Sometimes when you buy the little widgets, they're actually on there. I have almost never had that come up. A lot of times people just play that, okay, it's infinitely high, especially now where we're playing with 2D terrain, where that just really would not apply. It's just assumed it's going up to the ceiling and it blocks everything but really colossals type thing. Actually, no, I guess if you got a huge building, it could block a colossal. But anyway, yeah, just know that those rules do exist if you go to like a top table at a big convention, but most people don't even really apply that. If you are wanting to use that, either buy a widget that has it on there, or make sure that you cut something out of the book so you have it. And if you think it's going to be a big part of the game, I would seriously really look at sharing it with your opponent. You know, you really don't want that to come up. It's like, oh, actually this thing was a little bit too small, so my guy can now see you, so yeah, I guess you're kind of dead because this isn't as big as you thought. You don't want a game to end like that. They're going to think you're a prick, and you probably are. So don't have that come up, and be very clear about it. So there's line of sight in a very quick, rapid-fire manner. Hopefully that's what you were after, Brandon. And that's all the questions. And like I said, that was a lot of questions, but that's great. I love getting these all from you guys. Again, I post these on the Mr. Malorian Facebook page every single Friday, and then sometime during the weekend I'll answer them, put them up, and there you go. So thanks to all of you for putting on the questions. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you later. Bye. Hey there, if you liked watching this video, please go down and give it a like down below you here. And if you have any concerns or questions or comments, please put those in the comment section as well. You know, the best way for me to give you what you want to see is if you tell me what you like seeing and what you don't like seeing. So otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later.